Welcome to Story Craft Portal, where every story isn't just told, it's felt. Today, we unravel a haunting mystery buried for 44 years, a murder that remained silent until a tiny trace of DNA finally spoke in 2025. Vicki Radig, a 20-year-old with her whole life ahead of her, vanished into the Nevada desert in 1981. For decades, her case was a cold file collecting dust, until modern science brought her voice back, and with it, a chilling truth no one saw coming. It was 1981, the Nevada heat scorching the desert floor, when 20-year-old Vicki Radig suddenly disappeared. That day, she had gone to meet her boyfriend, Walter Bradley DeMint, but she never came back. Vicki was a bright, spirited young woman, full of dreams and laughter, her eyes brimming with hope for the future. Where her family realized she was missing, panic took over. They knocked on every door, called every friend, but no one had seen her. The police launched a brief investigation, but quickly labeled her a runaway, shelving the case with little effort. Some friends whispered that Vicki and Walter had argued the night before. Still, no one knew what truly happened. Days turned into weeks, and hope slowly faded. Her mother clung to a worn photograph. Her father searched the desert alone. But Vicki had vanished, without a trace, without a goodbye. 3 weeks after Vicki vanished, a hiker stumbled upon something chilling off Boulder Highway, a shallow grave, partly disturbed by desert winds. Police were called, and the scene was grim. A young woman's body, partially decomposed, was discovered with signs of blunt force trauma and stab wounds. Dental records confirmed what her family feared most. It was Vicki Radig. The community was shaken. This wasn't a runaway. This was murder. Detectives returned to Walter Bradley DeMint with questions, but he denied any involvement. He claimed he hadn't seen her since their argument. With no physical evidence linking him to the crime, police were left with theories and speculation. Still, something fell off. Her parents, shattered but determined, refused to let her memory fade. News outlets covered the case briefly, but interest quickly waned. And just like that, Vicki's story began to collect dust, until years later, science would finally catch up. Walter Bradley DeMint remained a free man. He moved towns, changed jobs, and carried on with life, while Vicki's family stayed trapped in grief. Walter was charming on the surface, clean-cut, polite, but those who knew him whispered of anger behind closed doors. Still, with no weapon, no witness, no DNA, the case stalled. Detectives followed leads that led nowhere, and after a year, the case officially went cold. Vicki's bedroom remained untouched. Her clothes still hung neatly, her journals locked away with poems and dreams never realized. Her mother lit a candle every night, whispering, "Someone knows." And someone did, but silence, like the desert, stretched wide and unforgiving. Walter never spoke of her again. He remarried, had children, lived a life. But justice remained buried. And so, the years crawled by, each one heavier than the last, until a sliver of hope emerged in a vial marked evidence. 1981. In 2021, a cold case unit revisited old evidence using new DNA technology. One envelope stood out, marked with Vicki's name and sealed for decades. Swabs taken from beneath her fingernails were tested using advanced forensic methods unavailable in the 80s. Within weeks, the results came in a match. The DNA belonged to Walter Bradley DeMint. But Walter had died in 2007. Justice had a name, but no one to punish. Detectives felt a mix of triumph and frustration. Still, Vicki's parents were called in. They sat trembling as officers shared the truth. Her father broke down, whispering, "I knew it." For them, the answer was a wound reopening and healing all at once. The media picked up the story again. DNA solves 44-year cold case. Though late, the truth breathed life into Vicki's memory. She had fought. She had left a trace. And that trace finally spoke loud enough to be heard. Walter Bradley DeMint's past was dragged back into the light. Though gone, his secrets couldn't stay buried. Investigators pieced together his history, previous domestic violence accusations, a controlling personality, and a short temper. Friends who once stayed silent began to talk. One woman recalled seeing scratches on wall through the day after Vicki vanished. Another remembered him burning clothes behind his house. None spoke before. Fear and doubt kept them quiet. But now, truth had momentum. A memorial was held for Vicki, this time not in mourning, but in honor. Her story aired across national platforms, a symbol of how victims are never truly forgotten. Her parents, though older now, stood stronger than ever. They spoke her name into cameras, into history. Vicki was no longer the girl who disappeared. She was the girl who fought back. And the world finally listened. As the case made headlines, more details from the past surfaced, whispers long buried under years of silence. Vicki's high school friend came forward with a journal entry Vicki had written just weeks before her death. It spoke of fear, of feeling trapped in her relationship with Walter. "He's not who people think he is," she wrote. Detectives analyzed the entry, and it painted a clearer picture of the control Walter had. Her voice, silenced for decades, now guided the truth. A podcast episode dedicated to the case went viral, with listeners drawn to Vicki's story, her strength, her smile, and her tragic end. Old photos resurfaced, each one a haunting reminder of the life stolen too soon. Her story began resonating with others, survivors, advocates, and strangers. Vicki became a symbol, not just of loss, but of resilience. And with every word spoken in her name, justice rang louder in the silence. Vicki's parents, now in their 70s, stood at the center of a renewed storm. Their grief had aged, but it had never faded. Armed with the truth, they spoke at public events, urging cold case funding and reforms in how victims are treated. They lobbied for Vicki's Law, a bill proposing permanent DNA preservation and required re-examination of unsolved cases every decade. Their efforts gained support from advocacy groups and lawmakers. "No other family should wait this long," her mother said, voice cracking. News crews followed their journey, capturing the faces of pain turned purpose. Behind the scenes, Vicki's brother sifted through old family videos, compiling a tribute that would later be played at schools to raise awareness. Their fight wasn't just for Vicki anymore. It was for every voice that had gone unheard. And though they couldn't bring her back, they were determined to make her legacy matter. With the case gaining traction, a documentary team approached the Radigs to tell Vicki's story through film. They combed through police records, old news footage, and personal memories to recreate the timeline. AI-generated reconstructions helped show the last known movements of Vicki, breathing visual life into the moments before her disappearance. The film didn't dramatize, it honored. The narrative, guided by her own journal entries and interviews, painted a chilling but respectful picture. When the documentary premiered online, it trended globally. Viewers messaged Vicki's family, thanking them for their courage. A scholarship was launched in Vicki's name for young women studying forensic science. She inspired a new generation, her father said. Vicki's story, once confined to fading paper files, had found new life. No longer forgotten, no longer silent. Vicki was now a symbol of justice delayed, not denied. And her name lived on, not as a victim, but as a voice. As the community revisited Vicki's story, guilt settled over many who had stayed silent. Former classmates apologized to the family, admitting they should have said more, acted sooner. The town, once indifferent, now mourned collectively. A mural was painted downtown, showing Vicki with her journal in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beneath it read, "She was never lost. We just didn't listen." Survivors of abuse found strength in her story. A women's shelter in her name opened with donations pouring in. Teachers included her case in classes about media bias, victim blaming, and justice reform. A local newspaper editor published a public apology for dismissing her disappearance. Vicki's story had evolved from tragedy into a movement. It wasn't just about one girl anymore. It was about many. Her name echoed in speeches, classrooms, and community halls. Finally, It felt like her town had answered the question they once ignored. Where is Vicki? In 2025, the Henderson Police Department officially closed the Vicki Radig case. A final press conference was held. Detectives, family, journalists, and supporters gathered to witness the closure. We owe this not to ourselves, but to her, the lead investigator said. Though Walter Bradley DeMint would never stand trial, the truth had caught him. His name now sat in bold on a cold case board marked solved. Vicki's father stood with a steady voice and said she never gave up. Even in death, she fought. Her story closed with truth, dignity, and a legacy that would outlive those who once ignored her. As the cameras clicked and the sun dipped behind the desert hills, a sense of peace settled in. Vicki Radig was no longer a forgotten file. She was a name carved into justice, a light that refused to dim. The chapter closed, but her voice will echo forever.